You're listening to Rights and Wrongs from Human Rights Watch. I'm Ngofeen Mputubwele. This week, what it's like to be detained by ICE, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. What do you want people to know about your experience in ICE detention?
I don't think people are aware of what people go through inside. We were legally in the U.S.
In this episode, you're going to hear from two people. Someone detained on the inside and from a lawyer on the outside. We recorded this interview in September 2025. The story takes place in Florida. Okay. There we go. How do I pronounce your name correctly, just for starters?
I was going to ask you the same thing. Well, mine's Harpinder.
Harpinder. Okay, yeah. Mine's Ngofeen.
Ngofeen.
In 2016, Harpinder, his wife, and their two kids emigrated from the UK to the US. They came in on an E2 investor visa. They bought a business, a barbecue franchise, that also did catering.
We were really good at catering, I have to say, as a family. Mm-hmm. You know, we were rock star status with Easy Cater, 4.9 out of 5 over thousands of caterings. You know, we did really good. We took a personal interest in it. And as all business owners do, there's nothing special there. But, you know, we went that extra bit.
But COVID hit, and they fell behind on their state taxes. Harpinder met with tax authorities and worked out a payment plan. By 2025, he was on an EB-5 visa, which allows for permanent residency, green card. But his tax problems complicated things, and he had to meet regularly with an immigration officer. At first, he did these meetings in person. Then the probation officer was sort of giving the vibe of like, yeah, I see you're going to pay it and all that's fine. Like, don't worry about it. You have to come in. You can do it remotely. And then he gets a phone call from the officer. Hey, we actually need you to come in. So on this particular day, he comes in person.
I mean, I remember feeling the family had just recovered from a flu and I was still kind of a little bit under the weather. So normally his office is, as you go through the main door, it's on the right-hand side. And then today he said to me, we're going to go this way. Okay, we're going this way. And next thing you know, I saw these two guys and he's already got the handcuffs out. Hey, we're from ICE. You've overstayed, was it what he said to me. You've overstayed since 2018. And he slapped the cuffs on me. And I'm like going, we haven't overstayed. You've made a mistake here. We're in status.
I've never been handcuffed. What does that feel like?
You just feel a sense that you're falling, that there's nothing to catch you now. There's no, they're not listening anymore, and you're not you anymore.
The ICE officers put Harpinder in a van and start driving. While he's in the car, his mind is spinning, thinking of all the logistical things he's supposed to get done. There's that catering gig he's supposed to show up for today. How is the rest of the family going to take care of that? Then there's the tax bill obviously hanging over the whole family, hanging over him, that he's legally dealt with. But there's this payment plan and he's like, I got to make sure that we get that paid, which means we got to work. We got to be working. And then there's his kids. His son starts calling.
He kind of sensed something was up there. I've been there too long. And then when he started to freak out was when we were driving down the 408 into central Orlando. And he's calling. He's calling and calling and calling. And like they just kept hanging up the phone. And I said to them, if you just tell him what's happened to me, he can start contacting lawyers and he'll stop calling you. But at the moment, he's going to carry on until he gets an answer. It's just any son would, especially my one. He's crazy. Not crazy, but he's lovable crazy.
Yeah. He arrives at some place he doesn't know, and once there,
we're waiting, and they put me in a cell with other people, and some of those people were frantic. crying, some were like laughing, and some other people were in tears. One had left his son, who was like 4 or 5 years old. He's really close to his son.
So you're already handcuffed at your wrists.
Yeah.
And then someone comes, tells you stand up, or you stay seated.
No, they get you out of the cells, and they take everyone out and you line up, and they bring these boxes out with these chains and cuffs in them, heavy boxes. And as they're pulling one out after the other, it makes that little rasping sound of the chains tangled up. The way those chains rasp and the way they behave when they're shackling you up, you just feel so. I mean, I used to hear that chain, and it used to just get to me. It used to get me to a point where I'm never going to come out of this. I couldn't. It's really hard to express. Just that noise, it's unbelievable. And they shackle your ankles, so one leg at a time, and they kind of like nudge you in the back. They don't even verbalize. Make you lift your leg up, like you would do like a horseshoe thing. They'd put one cuff on you, and then that's got a chain on it, onto the next leg. Then they would do one around your waist, make you turn around, and then they'd uncuff you from the front.
Like a belt almost? Same chain, like...
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then that was it. Then they chucked us on a bus. You can't even make the step up to the bus with the chains around your ankles, and you're just shuffling along, trying to find a seat. And it's just this bus of desperation, like just people that are just lost all hope.
Seven, 8-hour bus ride. What to you is like an example of a day in detention that sort of like typifies what you experienced there?
So if you'd allow me, there's 3 different types of experience.
Please.
So the first one was when we were in processing. So after waiting outside that facility for 3 hours in the bus,
Mm-hmm.
we were brought in, and we were put in a room which is just pure concrete.
No window.
There's like a little ridge that people could sit on, but it's all concrete. And there's an open toilet at the back. And it says on there maximum capacity 25. And we were, at that time, 42 of us. And then a few hours later, we were about 50 or so in that one room. And that stayed for 4 days like that. So you're trying to find somewhere to sit, trying to find somewhere to lie down. And people were taking turns, people sleeping around where people were doing, toilet and things.
How big, like the room, like how would you describe it?
Smaller than like a master bedroom, smaller than a master bedroom. Like literally, if we had everyone sitting down, everyone else was standing up. So you could probably have about 20, 22 people sitting down, and everyone else was lying out on the floor. So, you were kind of head one way, head the other way, head one way, head the other way when you were trying to lie down to get some kind of sleep. I was using my shoes for a pillow, one toilet, no water. They said there's water in the tap on the toilet, but who's gonna, and we were asking for fresh water. It just depended on the guard. You'd get fed, just tiny portions, no medication. I had no medication. When they brought me into that facility, they took my asthma inhaler from me as well. So I had I take insulin, all this kind of stuff, and heart meds and pancreas meds, and none of those were made available for me. And I had no idea of, what time or day it was. So disorientated. And every 2 hours they'd come in and do a count. We're not spawning in here. We're not. It's concrete everywhere. You've got the keys to the door. You put us in there. Why do you need to count us every 2 hours?
And so you're eating in the cell, not like out in like a cafeteria type deal.
Yeah, in the cell. Well, most of the time it was in polystyrene containers.
That's those white like takeout containers.
And we're still in shackles. They didn't unshackle you from the waist or anything. So you're having to kind of stoop down and eat like a dog out of a bowl. So you kind of like just all hunkered up together and you're eating like out of a bowl. Some people bend over as much as they can and try to, it's like we're not human anymore.
From the processing center, which was called Chrome in Miami, they moved to the second type of facility.
They call it the camp. So you come out of processing and they put you in a camp. A big warehouse designed for 48 detainees. There was like 100 of us in there. So temporary beds were put out, and you share 4 showers, 4 toilets between 100 people. You couldn't get sunlight. We were all quarantined. People were suffering everywhere. 3 people actually. 1 person died of tuberculosis from our unit, and 2 were isolated. We had no hand wash. We had no sanitizer. You couldn't you couldn't go to the toilet in privacy. There's someone sitting right next to you, showering open in front of everyone. The guards they don't care about you. They don't care. And from what I gather, those guys were getting paid $50 an hour. One of them was bragging that he was making $16,000 that month. And it's like on the heads of us, and it, by treading on us.
Let's take a moment and talk about the treatment of the guards.
I remember there was 2 officers in particular. I don't know if I can mention them by name.
Mm-hmm.
But they would come in at 5 a.m. for a 6 o'clock shift just because they enjoyed riling everyone up, banging on the door, shouting, screaming.
What do you mean when you say they're banging on walls and yelling? Like
no, they would kick doors. They would go by, hit the doors with whatever they had, just screaming at 5 o'clock in the morning.
What are they screaming?
Like just whoa, like that. Come on, it's just like like that. Like I don't know what they got out of that. I just don't get it. Woo, and then. They picked on 2 black guys in particular. One guy, like his sweetest guy, he's from Uganda, Kakanyero. They picked on him like you wouldn't believe. Like Kakanyero would be like, fat boy, fat boy, fat boy. Like just shouting at him, top of their voices. Then that went to cowboy, and cowboy means poop in Latin language. Hey, fat boy. Fat boy. And he's saying, look, you guys might not whatever, but he goes, I come from Uganda. I come from a strong lineage of, and I'm proud of my name. Cowboy. Don't ridicule my name. I'm here not as a prisoner. I'm not here as we're detainees. We're not being here for punishment. We're here until you guys process us. And they just wouldn't stop on him. They really wouldn't. To the point where, Kakanyero went on suicide watch after they kept on harassing him. And then, this isn't a job. That's not part of your job, to put people down. And, and then one day, like, this guy that's just such a stone wall of ignorance and hate comes up to me one day and says that, hey, so you're the barbecue guy. I'm like, dude, what is this? What do you want from me? Leave me alone. Mm-hmm. I'm the barbecue guy. I'm the guy that also asked you to open the door so I could take a breath of oxygen. But then when he said that to me about the restaurant thing, I said, dude, me and you are not going to connect. I'm not having any kind of conversation with you. You are what you are, and you're going to be that. I'll be out of here one day. I'll be, whether it's here or whether it's back in the UK, I'll be alive. I'll be with my family at one point. and we'll come back from this. But you're going to be here for the rest of your life, I said to him. And I said, that's all you're worthy of. Don't talk to me. Just leave me alone.
Third type of facility. Federal.
The worst experience all was in the federal prison in Miami. That was just, it takes everything and it destroys you. There was a group of us that had been together since February. And when we walked into that federal prison that night, as soon as we walked in, and we're going deeper and deeper into the prison, and then they opened that floor up, and this, it's typical. It's just like a movie scene where people are like banging on the doors, looking at you through the little glass on their cells. And I just remember looking at my friend Marlon, and I was thinking, we are in big trouble here. This is not. None of this was for us, but this is a level that I don't think I'm going to be able to handle this. This is like, wow. And then, some of us were lucky enough to get bunked together, but I had to go bunk with a person I'd never seen before who did have an edge to him. And to be in it and to just, that utter despair every night when they lock that door, knowing that you just can't go out. We had a little tiny slit window that looked out over the southern cityscape of Miami, which is quite beautiful. But I remember sleeping the other way. I just didn't want to look at it. I thought America's kind of turned its back on me. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to look how beautiful it is. I don't want to. It was just burning me, And I remember one conversation we had with my friend, the Cuban guy who we were bunking with, and he said, this is America, Harry. We're going to be fine. And after a while, I said, what is America is this toilet that's not working. That's America. Outside's not for me or us. We're in here because that isn't for us. This is our reality. Toilet that doesn't work. We got a guard screaming in your face telling you, I just don't give a F. We had no AC for the last 2 weeks in that cell. Banging on the door, just asking for, just let me, I'd lie down and try and gasp air through the bottom of the door just because the outside had AC, but we didn't have any in our cell. Just desperate acts like that. And then when you relay that to another human being whose safekeeping is in their hands, whether they like it or not, whether that's in their job description that they want to be a part of or not, the true facts are that if something happens to me, it's their responsibility. But they just don't care. When I talk about the guards, 99% of them were the way I describe them. There were some nuggets. There were some good people in there. Very few, but there were. Mr. Wilson, I remember from Chrome, he said to me, I said to him, like, is there any chance I can get, my inhaler? And he says, you shouldn't be without your inhaler. And you could see he was visually upset by, the way we were being treated. And he took me to see if we could go and find it. And so, there was just bin after bin after bin of these, anonymous brown envelopes full of people's, valuables, mementos, money, all this kind of stuff. But no process. There's no order to anything. Everything is just haphazard and random. And I just saw this one thing that had a trail of towns that this bin had gone through, and I thought it's got to be this one. Dug around in there, and I found my inhaler. And I put it in my pocket, and that first breath of beautiful air,
Harpinder was deported back to the UK. He hasn't seen his family since. When we come back, the outside from an attorney.
I'm Juanita Gubertus Estrada, America's director at Human Rights Watch. I used to be a congresswoman in Colombia. From climate change to creeping authoritarianism, the challenges facing Latin America and the Caribbean are very complex and are varied. The work we do is often difficult. Sometimes it's even overwhelming, but it is always, always rewarding. And it is thanks to our supporters that my team is able to continue to stand up for people's rights in the region, to shine a spotlight on crimes and abuses, to pursue justice and accountability, but most importantly, to prevent future violations. If you would like to join them in supporting our work, please visit hrw.org/podcast/donate. That's hrw.org/podcast/donate. Thank you.
Now that we've heard what Harpinder's detention was like on the inside, let's talk to a lawyer on the outside to analyze all of this a bit. This is a woman from my home state of Tennessee, a straight talker who basically summarized how this entire system works.
My name is Katie Blankenship. I am an immigration attorney, and I am the director of Sanctuary of the South. We have clients in detention centers throughout the country, as well as a large number of non-detained clients.
Mm-hmm.
All right. There are 3 ways that ICE can have a detention center. 3 ways. ICE can run it. They're on site. It's ICE agents all day, but they do contract out to private prison. They fully contract out with a private prison group. Or 3, they enter into, and this is like a whole alphabet soup, what's called an IGSA, an Intergovernmental Services Agreement with a small municipality. Think Baker County, Florida.
Okay.
Everybody listening to this podcast who pays their taxes, it costs us upwards of $200 a day per person in ICE detention. Where does that money go? That money goes to the private prison companies. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, ICE opens these centers that are in contract with the local municipalities in very remote places of the country. The remoteness of these facilities is very intentional. There's very little legal services in these areas. There's very little access to any sort of resources or immigrants' rights protection or know your rights, which are any of the things that you would get where there's a larger municipality or even contact to legal services. When you are in ICE detention, you are not provided the same rights as you are if you're in criminal detention. So they can pick me up. They can take me to any detention in the country. They don't have to tell me where I'm going. They don't have to tell me where I am when I get there. They don't have to tell me how to contact legal services. I have had families come through and literally be separated, intentionally sent to the most remote, different parts of the country just to be cruel, just to separate people and have them in as remote places as possible. What also happens, and that's critical, is that in these smaller communities, they are poor communities, right? A tiny, tiny little place does not have a lot of money.
You're talking about like the remote community?
The rural community. So let's talk about like Baker County, Florida. It's a perfect example. Baker County is in a little town called McClenny, Florida. There's hardly anything there except for a courthouse that has the mural of the KKK. McClenny, Florida is a tiny town in North Florida. There is nothing around there except Jacksonville's about an hour away. Tallahassee's about an hour and a half away. There is not a single immigration lawyer in a 60-mile radius. None. Doesn't exist. Wow. Baker County, because it is such a small town, because it has such a small budget on its own, courted ICE, created this facility, and propped up their entire county budget on the ICE detention center. And this happens, and this is the same thing that's happened in Stewart, Georgia, in Glades County, Florida, throughout Louisiana. Like this happens over and over again. So this county is now completely reliant on these funds, right? They have now created a budget that is completely reliant upon these funds. And what is their impetus when considering what provisions to provide, how to run this facility, and then consider what happens when they make those decisions and have no immigration training, have no understanding of the immigration system, do not understand the difference between civil and punitive detention, right? They don't know any of that. But they do know that if they don't have that money, the county collapses. Even with the ICE money, they're hardly making through. We would see city commissioner meetings from Glades County, Baker County, over and over again. You'd see they weren't even in the black when they were getting the ICE money. So what are they going to do? They're going to provide as little as possible. They're going to give the worst medical care. They're going to give the cheapest. They're going to be understaffed. It's over and over and over again. So if you couple the idea that it is more profitable to be cruel with an anti-immigrant animus that has been so profusely and disgustingly successful that has mostly come from the right-wing Republican Party, but every political leader in this country is guilty of it. Obama deported the most people, and every one of our leaders has disappointed us on this issue. And to not understand that we are destroying lives and frankly destroying the fabric of this country for money and profit and power at the expense of human beings.
In theory, assume ICE detains someone legally. What would be the legal way to treat them? What are the standards, and where do those standards come from?
Well, they really start and end with the United States Constitution. So immigrants, anybody on American soil has constitutional rights. End of story. That's not debatable. There's been a lot of stuff in the news under this administration. They don't have due process. They don't have anything. BS. No, completely false. Like flag on the field, right? Their rights are differently considered, right? There are some rights that, yes, American citizens have that immigrants might not have, but basic Bill of Rights, right to due process, right to free speech, right to be free of cruel and unusual punishment, all applies 100%. So this is where the law really stops and starts for the standards available to immigrants in detention. They also have a right to counsel. There's a big difference, right? If I'm arrested for a DUI, I have a right to a counsel that the government pays for. If ICE comes to my door and takes me into detention, I have a right to an attorney that I pay for. That's the biggest difference. There's no free counsel. But a person in detention has a right to call their lawyer and have a right to confidential conversations. Those rights can be violated and federal lawsuits can be filed. We have one right now ongoing. Besides that, the national detention standards set out specific, they're exactly what they say in the name. They are the standards by which people are supposed to be detained when in ICE custody. And those detention standards are violated all day, every day. The national detention standards set forth all sorts of critical things, like what happens if somebody has a serious mental health issue? What happens if somebody has suicidal ideation? What happens if the guards use force? There's supposed to be reports about it. They're supposed to actually get permission. It's supposed to be reviewed. There's supposed to be documents in the file. I can't tell you the last time I've seen something like that in somebody's file, right? There are specific criteria set forth also in the national detention standards of medical emergencies. I have a client, Maxim Cherniak, who died at Chrome after being there for 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, begging for medical attention, and they failed to do anything they're supposed to do by their own standards and just frankly their oaths of do no harm. We're filing a federal lawsuit for wrongful death on his behalf because he would be alive today if not for ICE. We firmly believe that. So there are frameworks in place, but when we are operating in a lawless system, what good are these laws?
Katie says that her client was a Ukrainian refugee who entered the country in 2024 and was granted humanitarian parole. And after having seizures and not receiving medical care for about 4 hours, he was found brain dead. He was 44 years old.
There is a feeling right now, like in this work right now, it is almost impossible to win at all, to get any sort of relief. Asylum cases are being denied at a rate I haven't seen before on cases I would typically win, mostly because judges are too scared not to go with the Trump playbook because he just fired 125 of them. There is no more bond. Bond is basically over.
Tell us what bond is. I think this little foray into the weeds is really important because, like everything with this situation, it is in the weeds that the humanity of people gets choked out.
Well, typically, for the entire time there's been ICE detention centers, there are two ways that people typically get out while their case is pending. All right? One is bond and one is parole. A bond is a serious thing. I have to file a bond motion. I have to put forth proof of this person's value to the community, show that they are not a risk of flight, show they have no history of violence, show why they're important to their community, present multiple levels of support from their community, a sponsor in the community, money so that they can be tracked. It's like, this is not a simple thing. The judge has done a considerate, evaluation of a case. Mm-hmm. Bond is over. And then to double the pain, the Trump administration in D.C. has sent clear instructions to ICE that there basically is no more parole. They have said in memos it must now be done on a case-by-case basis, because typically there's all sorts of people that sure, you're going to process them for their case, they're going to show up, but there's no need to keep them in detention.
So what does all that legalese mean practically?
So every humanitarian parole request I submit, I've done so for people with stage 4 kidney failure. We've submitted parole requests for pregnant women. We have submitted parole requests for mothers who just recently gave birth. There's just no words for it.
What should people know? These are conversations that I am having. I'm sure you are having, but I'm actually having with, I've had 3 conversations this week with friends where we're like, okay, if something happens to somebody, what should we do? Do we like go out there and be like, you can't do this because XYZ? Do we need to like have a rights card? Like, what are some of the types of things that people can do if they're in the state where they can?
Okay, so let's say you're at, you are witnessing an ICE raid or an ICE action. You should maintain a safe distance, but record and narrate. Record and narrate, record and narrate. If the officers approach you and say, are you recording? You say, yes, it's my right to do so. If they tell you that it's illegal or not to do that, you should stop, because you will get arrested and they will destroy the footage you've gotten, most likely. So try your best to adhere to the instructions of the law enforcement officers, but while documenting as much as you can. And then you need a plan for getting that out there. Having local contacts in the press is a great idea. Most every community in the country has some sort of immigration coalition going on right now. You should find them, but you're going to want to document. And yes, know your rights cards actually is a brilliant idea. There's a huge amount of false information that goes out to our immigrant communities. And the biggest thing to take away is if ICE doesn't have a judicial warrant, goodbye. It is illegal. Judicial warrant or no, they can't come into your house. They can't do any of that. Because if ICE knocks on your door and they have an ICE warrant and not a signed and dated judicial warrant, they don't come in.
One last practical thought from Katie.
If you are truly invested in helping your immigrant communities, then you need to invest in your community. So there should be some sort of plan within community groups that are supporting each other. Let's say there's an ICE raid at the Home Depot down the street in your town. There should be a phone tree that people are calling. There should be some sort of alert system that's going out to folks. And there should be some sort of emergency plan for when folks get detained, that there is help to get them legal counsel, at least immediately. Because the minute you have a lawyer, even in this completely effed up system, the difference of a lawyer is huge. They know that somebody's eyes are on this person. They cannot just be disappeared. If I was doing deep community planning right now, I'd be talking about, okay, there's a raid in our town. Where is the safe place people can go? We've identified the Rotary Club, the church, and the school. There are private signs in each of these rooms where people can go. That's what's going to happen. For the people who are detained, we're getting in touch with their families. We're making sure the children can get to school safely, and we're getting them in touch with legal counsel.
Katie Blankenship, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Human Rights Watch has a report on U.S. detention called You Feel Like Your Life Is Over: Abusive Practices at 3 Florida Immigration Detention Centers since January 2025. Katie Blankenship contributed to that report, and it includes Harpinder Chauhan's story and many others. To learn more, go to hrw.org. If you're looking for a list of community resources, Katie Blankenship, who I spoke to, suggests everyone check the aclu.org to find local community immigrant alliances. This episode was produced by me and Curtis Fox. Sophie Soloway is the associate producer. Anthony Gale is the executive producer. I'm Ngofeen Mputubwele. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. Thanks for listening.